Sorry, Kenneth. I know that we are fellow YC alum. I understand. I fucking hate this tweet. Let's talk about Next.js as a backend framework. So, for those that don't know, Next.js is not a front end framework. A front end framework is a thing that runs usually exclusively on the front end, and it is a way to define, build, integrate, and scale your front end developers and your front end application. Front end frameworks don't usually run on a server. Next.js is as much a front end framework as Rails, the difference being that Next's templating system happens to spit out a really good React app on top. Next.js is Next.js for backend. Let's be very clear about that. So, how did we get here? Because I feel like we have been having this conversation for too long and nobody sat down and like just shouted about what the fuck. So we're going to sit here and shout because, man, I am so tired of us building projects with a Next.js front end and an Express MongoDB backend in the same repo with no real relationship between the two. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of Next that I see more often than not. So, Next.js is a backend framework. So let's start by breaking down what a front end. Yeah, let's do it like this. What does a front end or backend framework do? A backend framework can do lots of different things. It can runs code on a server that the user does not own. I should even say on a computer or CPU that the user does not own. Usually that is in the state, or that is a server on a box somewhere like AWS. You can have it in a serverless environment like Lambdas or on edge functions, but all of those are running on CPUs that the user themselves do not own. The developer probably doesn't either, but they're paying a fee to have access to them. But the key of a backend framework is that it runs on code or on machines that users do not use. They request to and receive a response from. Usually a backend framework prescribes a method for making and fulfilling requests to servers. Yeah, I'll call them servers for here. So for those that have used Next.js before, I'm going to ask another question. How does Next.js differ from CRA? Pop quiz. Who has the answers? It's a really obvious one. It can run on a server. SSG, ISR, etc. And it allows you to build API endpoints for sending, receiving non-HTML things. Even it has a pages dir for creating new HTML routes in React. So, as you see here, the things that Next does different from Create React App are actually the things that a backend framework does. It runs on a server and allows you to build endpoints for sending and receiving non-HTML things. So it prescribes a method for sending or making and fulfilling requests to servers. It has a page directory for creating new HTML routes in React, which is also a method for making and fulfilling requests to servers. It is a backend written around building the best possible React experience, which is kind of trippy to think about. It's awesome, in my opinion. It is so cool that there is a framework that is Express compliant. You can write and use pretty traditional Express functions in it. So let's take another angle. If I had a CRA, when would I start building, or why do I need a backend? There's a lot of reasons why you might need a backend as a CRA user. One is you need to get data the user doesn't have, or you need to authorize the user, or you need to share data the user has with other users. You need to persist anything. There's a pile of reasons why you might need to start building a backend inside of your Create React app or for your Create React app. These are all things where you might start building a new project. That is your backend that your Create React app now can consume. Everything here Next gives you some method to start doing. Why or how do I use Next.js for my backend? Great question. The easiest way, the /API directory. For those that don't know, and this actually isn't just a Next.js thing, Next does it exceptionally well, but they have made this accessible outside of Next.js. So in Next.js, you're able to define a function in a folder, pages/API, so you can have /user.jsts, whatever, return some JSON, or you export a function, and this function is an Express compliant request response handler function. You call on the response.status and .json, and this will send a 200 status code with that JSON on it. And now whenever you call /API/user, you get this JSON back. This is built into Next. It just is part of it. As long as you're not doing a static deployment and Next is actually like owning its runtime, you can add a new endpoint very trivially, effectively for free. You add a file, and now you have a new endpoint. What's cool is you don't even need to be using Next for this part. In Vercel, if you don't have Next.js and you're like just deploying to Vercel, you can ignore pages/API, just make a /API directory, and anything you put in there that's not prefixed with an underscore will then be compiled and built into a serverless function. I think there's a limit to how many you can have in one repo, unless you're paying some fee, and it has to rebuild each one. So if you have 15 of those, your build time is going to suck, whereas Next is smart enough to compile them all into a single Lambda, so the build is significantly faster. But you can very trivially add any Lambda function, serverless runtime you would want in here. And this isn't just limited to TypeScript. That's the really cool part here. You can put a Go file, a Python file, or a Ruby file in the API directory. So if you do API/date.go and export a handler, you just built a Lambda function, a serverless Golang Lambda function on Vercel by making a file. This is really powerful. This isn't for the Next backend. This is for a Vercel backend. You can do this in any Vercel project. You can use anything for anything in that sense. What I'm showing you is that Vercel makes it trivial to write a file, and that is your backend now. It's just, you can now run code on a server. You put something in the API folder, and now that gets deployed as a Lambda. And Next, you can do it inside of pages/API, and then you have access to all of the things in the project, all the node modules, all the packages, all of the like typings, everything directly. It's generally in Next.js a lot nicer to write these things in JavaScript, TypeScript, whatever. But you can go make a API directory, drop a Golang file in there, and then have a Golang Lambda function if you want. Oh. I did see somebody ask earlier, how do you connect to a database in Next.js? The same way you do in any other Node.js environment, you call it. So in Next.js, let's just go to any of my projects. Roundestmon. So now in here, let's go make a new API. get Pokemon.ts. Cool. Fine. Now I have the server running locally. Let's export default cool. It's actually going to take an ID here. This is going to take a request. Next API request response. Next API response. And in here, sure, well, we'll do that for the autocomplete for now. Localhost 3000 /API/get-Pokemon. Message hello world. So now we have an API inside of our next app. Cool. But I need to get stuff from DB. Cool. First off, this probably needs to be async. Now, let's get some stuff from DB. That's Pokemon equals await. Let's get all of them. Await Prisma.Pokemon.find many. Select, what do we want to select from Pokemon? We'll select their name and their ID. And now we can return this as JSON. That's all I was missing, the -s. Thank you. Cool. So here's all the Pokemon coming from there. Prisma's not REST. Prisma has nothing to do with REST. If those things are associated, you need to like change your understanding of REST, or maybe just drop the term. Like Prisma is a way to interface with your database. It is not a protocol. It is not dedicated to a protocol. It is a way to have some code that probably runs on a server, almost definitely in Node, connect to a database and get things from it. What you do from there is what you do from there. Prisma was actually originally written as a GraphQL client. It had nothing to do with databases. It was just a way to attach a database to a GraphQL schema. That was Prisma v1. v2 moved away from that model in favor of being an ORM because they noticed that was a space that needed the help more, and Prisma did a great job of that. But here, like, there is no reason to do this anywhere else. The alternative to doing it here is spinning up an additional project, spinning up like Express or Fastify or any of the new solutions, or building a GraphQL service to do that all on top of as well. And then writing these same functions and putting them there. I personally think that the boilerplate here that is annoying is these guys and this, and moving out of Next into something else like Express or Fastify will not help with either this or this boilerplate. And moving to something like GraphQL is building a giant wall that is boilerplate that you refer to as your schema and then going out of your way to honor it on both sides. Like the complaints I've heard about this, actually, do I call it another poor person on Twitter? I think I have to call it another poor person on Twitter because there was somebody whose replies just killed me. Here. Building a personal project using Next API and recently switched everything over to a separate Nest.js backend. Next API routes felt too disorganized. Where with Nest, I have easily set up cookie auth, RBAC, and a module for processing Stripe webhooks. What the fuck? I think later he's mentioned that he was like younger and doesn't really like know what he's doing just yet. So I feel bad picking on this tweet. I'll probably like blur this out in the video. But man, that it's a fundamental misunderstanding on like 15 different layers. More code isn't more structure. More boilerplate isn't more better or better dev. It's actually quite often the worst. If you feel like having a bunch of files is convoluted, don't. I don't think it matters that much. I think having 15 API things here that do what they're supposed to makes sense. But if your problem is it's too much, the solution isn't adding more, and it's certainly not breaking out and building a whole additional thing to manage that complexity in a more complex external environment and then bridging the complexity between the two. The solution is a thing we talk about a lot here, TRPC. Because when I want to move this to a TRPC router, or even worse, let's say I want to get an input on here. So I want to take the ID off of the request. So we have the request has a body on it that is the ID. Cool. Request.query. Cool. Now the ID comes through here. I'm probably going to have to validate this if no ID res.status.400.send please include ID. Cool. So now I should be able to where ID, right? Wait, I'm getting a type error there. Why am I getting a type error here? Because this could be an array. So what we also have to check is type of, or no ID, or type of ID is not equal to string. Please include ID and just one. And now we should know that this is a string. Oh, because I'm not returning, so we don't. And now all those conditions are handled. Oh, it's a number in here. So I then have to parse this. Parse int. This is actually a much better example than I thought it was. Okay, so here is an endpoint, a pretty traditional. So as you see here, we have a lot of code for passing an ID and returning a Pokemon. So let's go rewrite this in TRPC. I'll put this guy here. We will go to my backend router. So I'm going to cut off a bit of the code of my face. That's fine though, my face is pretty. We're going to go make a new query for getting a Pokemon. Dot query. Get Pokemon. In here, we need an input. That's not object. All right, and this will be a z.objects. We want to specify that we want an ID that is a number. We even set a dot min of 1 because it has to be 1. 0 is invalid. Dot max. This goes up to 493. This isn't all Pokemon. This is most. And we need to have an async resolve, which takes in that input. And in here, cool. Pretty cool when Copilot just gets it right. Probably wouldn't quite do it this way because we know that the ID is going to return a valid Pokemon. And I guess throwing, if it doesn't, makes sense. Yeah, this is fine. And change this to find first. If no Pokemon, we throw. Oh, so you return the Pokemon. Cool. So instead of writing our own validator, validating, like we yank this off here, we validate it ourselves, and we don't even know if it is a number or it's a number within the right range. So this is less valid and more code. If we wanted this to be just as valid, what we'd have to do here is const number ID equals parse int ID 10 if no, or if is none or number ID is cool. res.status.400.send make sure ID is between 1 and 493. And I have to return because otherwise it's going to keep running this code. Okay, so I could use Zod in here too. Yes, I could define a Zod validator. The problem is I would have to catch and throw and do all of that logic myself. The thing I'm complaining about is people saying that Next.js APIs are boilerplatey or too much extra work, so they're going to use something else instead. The boilerplate here is things you need in other backend solutions anyways. You need to validate. You need to make sure it's within the right range. You need to make sure the types are correct. And then you can do the thing you want to do and return it. The difference is you're going to lose the type definition here unless you're fulfilling it against a GraphQL type thing. And the relationship between here and your client gets lost entirely with that as well. So if I was to move this over to Nest.js or Express or Fastify, 95% of the code here is still going to be here. In particular, the shitty part. All of this is still going to be in your custom endpoint anyways. So if your problem is that this is too much, don't add more. Move to a solution that handles it. This does all of what that does in a much more maintainable way that actually honors the contract between your client and your server. It is the only way, as right now, period, that doesn't require a compiler or some crazy bullshit, that lets you write a function on the server and then call it on the client with type safety between both. It is beautifully elegant. And this also gets served the same way as that get Pokemon endpoint. It's API/TRPC/TRPC.ts. And this one endpoint serves all of the functions for your queries and your mutations. It creates a next API handler and handles everything from there. Could you use Zup or Yup instead of Zod in TRPC is a question we just got. Yes, you can, but you never should, because Yup is incredibly untype safe. It is Yup was written before type safety, and TypeScript was really a thing. Zod was written to be the type safe validator solution. So if the reason you're moving to something like this is for the type safety, please use Zod with it. Like, the other cool thing about TRPC and Zod in the history there is that the creator of Zod is actually the person who started TRPC, and there's a long relationship there. TRPC is now mostly or almost entirely run by Cat Alex, who we should probably fairly call the creator of TRPC. He made it what it is, but it started as Zod. Like, Zod was wrapped into TRPC. It's since been extended where you can use other validators, but honestly, you shouldn't. Like, just use Zod. It's really good. So I saw somebody ask about auth. Yeah, auth can be annoying. If your auth problem is in client, like you want to authorize things within your client, NextAuth is phenomenal. Very good package. It's a bit to set up. There's a lot of good examples. You can ask questions in my Discord and theirs if you have any issues. It is a pretty good community. They're constantly improving things. The cool thing about NextAuth is it has providers for all the different OAuth things you might want to do. Like, you can connect directly through Auth0, you can do auth for Twitch, you can do auth through Discord, Spotify, all sorts of shit. That's how we're doing auth at Ping. But you also have these adapters. The adapters are interesting because unlike most auth solutions, NextAuth doesn't tell you how to store the data. It recommends a bunch of different ways and gives you adapters for them. But NextAuth doesn't prescribe you a storage solution. So what I use with NextAuth is Prisma, and they give an example of how to create an auth endpoint in your Next app, API/auth/nextauth.js. And here you export the NextAuth adapter, and you provide it the Prisma auth, like Next adapter for auth adapter, for it to use to manage all the sessions in DB. Then you have to add their account and session and user models to your DB, which you can then extend as you please. But you own your auth with NextAuth. You're not handing it off to some external party. You own your entire auth story through NextAuth, and it's all being served through your Next.js API endpoints the exact same way. So I personally really like this method of managing auth, and it has served almost all of our needs so far at Ping. They also have now a more generic SDK, if I recall, the client API, which isn't Next specific anymore. You can use it in any React app. I've seen some demos showing this in React Native, and I'm excited to see where that goes. But you'll be able to call like the NextAuth React package and have access to use session and other things as long as you provide the auth handler on top of the right URL. You'd also be able to call the endpoints, and I believe they have a vanilla JS SDK coming soon. I don't know if it's documented yet or not. I'm pretty sure it's done. That lets you hit your next endpoint and manage the sessions anywhere that can run JavaScript. So now the final question of, but what about external things? Like, if somebody just asked, like external auth solutions, or more importantly, external services you want to authenticate. So if I want to have an external API contact or like hit an endpoint in my service here to get some data, like let's say I have a sign external request.ts, and is this function's job to take some request and then sign it with a super secret token. So const super secret token equals LOL. And this is gonna sign thing. const contents, delete the rest. And here, I don't even know the fucking crypto things anymore. We'll just multiply the two. Or const encrypted equals. There's not just an encrypt. I don't know how the crypto stuff works in Node. I actually don't know how crypto works in here. So let's say that this takes contents and some secret and then hashes it and gives you that. So some magical hash funk. So you call that with the content and super secret token, and you return that. I'll just send it. It's not gonna be like JSON. But this is an endpoint that is designed to only be interfaced with externally. Because like, what the fuck are you gonna do with this in your app? But now you can hit this endpoint /API/sign external request on whatever this is deployed to, and hit this and do whatever. You can call your DB from here. You can call Nextauth from in here and like validate sessions, things like that. You can do whatever you need to from in here. No reason not to. If you need to set up a webhook, like one thing that I see a lot, Stripe webhook.ts. Stripe provides really cool ways to validate a request. Stripe Next.js webhook validate. Cool. Found an article. Webhook secret. Yep. Cool. You have a webhook secret. And in the request, you can actually validate that you can call their like SDK stripe.webhooks.construct event from what you get there, because the event will be encrypted. You actually have to use the webhook secret to decrypt it and use it. And then in here, once you have the event and you can like use it for things, you can go persist something to your DB, send an email thanking them, whatever you want to do. Once that like gets hit, just do it in Next.js. Who cares? You're just writing a JavaScript function. Like, why are people building whole new whole new infrastructure and solutions? Because they feel bad writing a function inside of the thing they're already using. It makes no sense to me. What's my opinion on using something like Firebase or Supabase for auth? Avoid it if you can. Auth is one of those things that's really nice to own. Like, if you can confidently own your auth and it ever does something you don't want it to or doesn't do something you need it to, owning your auth lets you get out of it very easily. I like something we do a lot. We've changed what a user includes in our session multiple times now. We have changed which providers we do and don't support. We've changed how accounts are linked together. And we have the ability to do all of that because we own the auth layer. If you want to, as quickly as possible, get something scaffolded that has auth working, Supabase might help you get there faster. Firebase is going to cause more problems than it solves almost always. But generally speaking, owning your own auth solution makes life a lot easier. Cool. So to summarize, let's go back to my Excalidraw. Why do people say I shouldn't use Next.js as a backend? And why I actually shouldn't use Next.js as a backend. One last diagram to finish off this rant. Okay. Here's the one. It's unorganized. LOL. There's enough solutions to that at this point. Use gRPC, write better code, stop complaining. There's so many solutions there. Okay, so it's unorganized. It's a front end framework. Nest.js will make it simpler. No, demonstrated that. I need an external backend for auth. I really like Python. My backend team is bullying me. Why else? I'm allergic to TypeScript. Vercel is taking over the industry, and I am insecure about it. My boot camp taught me Express. Cool. Those are all the ones I can think of. Yeah, I need to decouple front end and back end. I think that kind of goes with the it's a front end framework thing, but yeah. So why should I actually not use Next as a back end? You're doing some wild processing that probably shouldn't be in JS at all. You're cool. So I'm adding this one last piece here. Your backend is doing something other than request and response. So like if you're not sending a thing and receiving a response, that's when, in my opinion, Next's patterns start to fall apart. I'll go on like a little mini tangent here. Next is a best in class serverless backend solution. So if you need to persist state, you want to have like Redis, you want to build PubSub, those are all things that should be done elsewhere. That doesn't mean you can't still use Next for a lot of your backend, if not almost all of your backend. For us, what we tend to do is we use Next.js as our backend. All of our like server code that we write and run runs in Next at Ping. And when we need something like an update event to occur that updates the client directly, then we use something external like Pusher or PubNub or Ably to trigger those events. When we want to do something with like WebRTC or file uploads, those types of things, we use Agora, we use S3, whatever makes sense for those jobs. But when it comes to requesting data and changing data and displaying data, which is the vast majority of what all endpoints do, Next is one of the best ways to do that, especially if you already have a client in Next that is rendering those things. So if you are using like WebSockets or WebRTC, you want to build that, still use Next. Just do these things elsewhere. Hey, did you know that over half my viewers haven't subscribed yet? That's insane. Y'all just click these videos and listen to me shout and hope that the algorithm is going to show you the next one. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, maybe even the bell next to it so that you know when I'm posting videos. Also, if you didn't know this, almost all of my content is live streamed on Twitch while I'm making it. Everything on the YouTube is cuts, clips, whatever from my Twitch show. So if you're not already watching, make sure you go to twitch.tv/Theo, where I'm live every Wednesday around 2 or 3 p.m. And I go live on Fridays pretty often as well. Thank you again for watching this video. Really excited. Thank you.